The End of the Road. It was supposed to be a fun Halloween-themed road trip for the Anderson family. Sarah and Mark Anderson, along with their two kids, Emma and Ben, had packed costumes, candy, and scary movies for a night in a rustic rental cabin in the woods. The plan was simple: enjoy the scenic fall drive, indulge in spooky stories around a campfire, and embrace the Halloween spirit together. After a day filled with autumnal views and roadside attractions, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the twisting mountain roads. They should have reached the cabin by now, but their GPS had glitched, leaving them winding through unfamiliar back roads. Growing frustrated and tired, Mark was relieved when they stumbled upon a quiet little town nestled in the valley, a town that seemed to have fallen out of time. The buildings were old-fashioned, with 1940s-style facades and dim flickering streetlights casting eerie halos. Decorations for Halloween lined every street, but something was off about them. The pumpkins wore grotesque expressions, straw-stuffed scarecrows had claws for hands, and the few townsfolk they saw were dressed in period costumes, except there was something unsettlingly real about them. Eyes followed the Anderson family with a gleam of anticipation, their smiles wide and unnatural. Feeling uneasy, they stopped at the only open business, a small diner with a glowing neon sign, End of the Road Diner. Inside, they found a waitress dressed as a ghost, her makeup so realistic that she looked more corpse than costume. She welcomed them warmly, but her words carried a strange undertone. So good to see new faces. Not many come around this way anymore. The Andersons tried to ask for directions to their cabin, but the waitress deflected, offering them the special Halloween dish, a stew that smelled both delicious and faintly metallic. They declined, deciding instead to ask a group of locals sitting in the corner who were whispering among themselves, casting glances at the family. The locals explained in oddly hushed voices that the only way out of town would be clearer in the morning. Disconcerted, Mark decided to leave anyway, but as they drove, they soon realized that every road they took seemed to loop back into the heart of the town. Despite their best efforts, they found themselves on Main Street, passing the diner again and again. With each pass, the streets looked a little darker, the townfolk a little more hungry. The Andersons' unease grew into outright fear. They decided to spend the night in the town's only inn, a dilapidated old building with peeling paint and creaky wooden floors. The owner, a man in a skeletal costume that looked uncomfortably genuine, led them to a room with old furniture and a cracked window that overlooked the town square. "Sleep well," he said with an eerie smile before he disappeared down the hall. In the middle of the night, Sarah woke to strange sounds, a shuffling noise as if someone were dragging something heavy through the hallway. She nudged Mark awake and they both strained to listen. Muffled whispers floated through the walls, punctuated by a child's giggle and the scratch of claws against wood. As they listened, the whispers grew clearer, sounding almost like chanting. Mark tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. They were locked in. Panicked, he tried calling the front desk, but there was only static on the line. With growing dread, they realized the kids were missing from their beds. A quick search of the room confirmed it. Emma and Ben were gone. They pressed their ears to the door, hearing footsteps and voices echoing down the hall, talking about new arrivals and the honored guests. Desperate, they forced the door open and snuck down the narrow corridor, creeping past rooms where shadows flickered and low voices muttered, "The children will be perfect." They finally located Emma and Ben in a grand dining hall at a table set for what looked like a Halloween feast. Townsfolk, dressed in chillingly realistic costumes, sat around the table, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. The children were seated at the head of the table, their faces pale and frightened. When Mark and Sarah entered, the room fell silent. One of the townsfolk, a tall man dressed as a butcher with a knife that glinted menacingly, stood up. "Welcome to the Feast of the Lost," he intoned solemnly. "Every Halloween, the town honors its tradition. The lost souls who wander into our embrace are given the honor of becoming part of us. Forever." Sarah demanded to know what they meant, but the townsfolk just smiled, eyes glinting in the dim candlelight. They explained that the town was trapped in time, forever cursed to relive Halloween night. Those who wandered into their fold on Halloween would be bound to the town, forced to join the feast, where guests became the feast itself. And each year, new guests must join them to keep the curse strong. In a desperate bid, Mark grabbed one of the candlesticks and brandished it as a weapon. He and Sarah managed to grab the children, and they dashed out of the hall, hearing the shouts and footsteps of the townsfolk close behind. They ran through the halls, past rooms that seemed to shift and change, almost as if the inn itself were alive, trapping them in a maze. Just when hope seemed lost, they stumbled into a room that had an old, crumbling door marked "Exit." Mark hesitated, sensing it might be a trap, but with no other options, they burst through. They found themselves back on the street outside, the cold night air sharp and bitter. The family dashed to their car, not daring to look back at the faces that peered from the diner windows, the inn, the sidewalks. Mark floored the gas pedal, and this time the road stretched out before them, straight and clear. As they drove away, the kids noticed something terrifying. In the rearview mirror, they saw the town fade into darkness, but the faces of the townsfolk remained, watching them, smiling. And in their laps, Emma and Ben clutched small gifts they hadn't noticed before, a pair of carved pumpkins with their names etched in a childlike scrawl. And beneath each name, a single word: return. The Andersons never spoke of the town again. But every Halloween, they felt a pull, a distant calling, as if the town was reaching out to them, beckoning them to come back, to join the Feast of the Lost.